Hi everyone, and welcome to our International Women in STEAM Forum. My name is Casey and my co-host today is Gemily. We are part of the Bendigo Tech School team and we're delighted to be showcasing engaging all ages in STEAM as a part of the Bendigo Invention and Innovation Festival. The Bendigo Tech School is a centre of deep learning that uses leading edge technology, discovery and innovation to solve real world problems. Our aim is to deliver advanced STEAM knowledge and skills that Victorian school students need to flourish in a rapidly changing global economy. We are hosted by La Trobe University Bendigo and we work in partnership with 14 local secondary schools, as well as local industry and enterprise. I'm going to now hand it over to Gemily, who is going to acknowledgement to country.
I would like to begin by acknowledging and paying my respects to the people and traditional custodians of the land of where we are all gathered today. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here today, also paying my respects to you elders, past, present and emerging. We express our gratitude in the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal, spiritual and cultural costs of that sharing, and I hope that we may walk forward together in harmony and spirit of healing. We also acknowledge guests that are coming and sharing this forum from overseas and internationally.
So let's be more inclusive. Let's be more inclusive to gender, religion, culture and economic status. From a young age, a lot of children are taught to include each other. And this can be seen with children demonstrating equality from a young age, despite all the barriers that tend to separate people. So what is happening that stops us from being inclusive? It's 2020 and we need to make changes to live in a more equal and inclusive world. Despite what debates can arise from this conversation, everyone can play a role in forging gender parity.
Before we get started, we invite you to participate in some statistics, and I'm going to get some polls up in a moment where I'd really encourage all the audience members to participate in answering the poll questions. Now, the first question is, in 2016, in a group of STEM graduates, 41.5% of men were more likely to work in STEM jobs compared to what percentage of women? So I'll give everyone a minute or so just to answer that poll. So the correct answer is 22.5%, so almost half of that. So really outstanding statistic there. So the next poll question we have was, on average, women in STEAM qualified industries made how much less than men in STEM qualified industries? I'll give everyone a minute or so there on this question too. So the answer to this survey question was 19%. So 3 of you ended up getting that one, so well done. And we have one more before we get into the forum. So less than what percentage make up female researchers in the world? Yeah, I think the audience have that one there. So 30%. So 30% less female researchers in the world. Now I'll pass on to Casey.
Research found within the Harvard Business Review found that companies with more women in leadership roles perform better and have better family policies. Diverse teams are often more innovative, productive, and have greater profits. And employees on diverse and inclusive teams put in more effort, stay longer, and demonstrate more commitment. So let's be optimistic about the future and support everyone to forge a more equal pathway. This leads us to introducing our wonderful panelists for today's International Women in STEAM Forum. Welcome Leah, Donna, Deepti, Madhu, and Suma.
Yes, welcome everyone. And I'll start the forum off by going with who's first in my my screen. So if I could ask Leah to share with us firstly what your current role is and what was your journey to get there?
Thank you so much, Jem and Casey. My name's Dr. Leah Heiss. I'm from the RMIT School of Design. I'm a designer, I'm a researcher, and I call myself a technologist. I head up the RMIT Wearables and Sensing Network alongside a number of other co-directors. And that brings together over 75 researchers from across 12 university schools to collaborate and connect on the development of wearable and sensing technologies. And the really important thing about that is to try and build new languages between our artists, our engineers, our fashion and textiles people, textile technologists, accountants. And so it's, you know, it's almost a bit like wrangling cats sometimes, but so important to provide those environments to for people to start to understand each other's gifts and capabilities and how they can find mutual territory between them. In my creative practice, I say that what I do is that I design wearable technologies, services and experiences to save or improve life. And what that kind of encompasses is that I've worked for the last 15 years on designing technologies that have a really strong focus on keeping people at the centre. And some examples of that are that I've designed a hearing aid that won the Good Design of the Year 2 years ago in 2018. I've worked on, you know, swallowable devices to detect disease, emergency jewellery for times of medical crisis, whole range of projects. And I'm lucky enough at the moment to be working with Madhu Bhaskaran, who you'll hear from in a few moments, and Sharastri Ram, a really amazing engineering team that are working with stretchable sensors. And as a designer, I get to come in here and I scaffold human-centered design around these extraordinary technologies. And currently we're looking at stretchable sensors for cardiovascular disease, heart health, post-operative scenarios in hospitals. But also I'm running a project at the moment, the design part of that, looking how we can use small stretchable sensors in aged care for COVID monitoring and general health and wellbeing monitoring. So I've got lots of different strings in my bow at the moment. And the final one is that I've just become a visiting scientist / designer with CSIRO. And that's really looking at this, how we can scaffold design thinking around the innovations that CSIRO has. How did I get here? I went on a windy path, and as I'm sure lots of people have. So my first degree way back was communication theory at the University of Canberra. I then did a degree in interior design at RMIT. And then I did a master's with the Spatial Information Architecture Laboratory. And that was an interdisciplinary lab with computer scientists and engineers and artists and designers. And I started to look at the role of wearable technologies in promoting empathy. And so in my master's from 2004 to 2006, I designed garments that sensed and transmitted heartbeat over distance. So I became very interested in collaborating across engineering and fashion design at that stage. And since then I've been doing residencies, and I've been involved with lots of organisations to bring design to these really advanced technologies. Finished my PhD a couple of years ago, and that was looking at designing emotional technologies. So how do we combine the things that we love and cherish, like the earrings that I wore for my wedding 10 years ago, with the technical functionality of medical devices, and try and find this beautiful middle path, which is beautiful things that also keep us alive. And yeah, so that's my path. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. I've got Madju next.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me over here. It's very exciting to be part of an international panel for STEAM. So I'll again talk about the first part of the question, which is my current role. So I'm a professor of electronics engineering at RMIT University, and we co-lead a group on functional materials and microsystems. Now, what we basically do within the group is we look at materials which at very, very small scales, so basically micro and nano scales. And the fascinating things with materials at those scales is the fact that they have very different behaviors to the way they behave at much larger scales. So we take those materials, probe them and study them at those scales, and then see what fantastic applications they could be used towards. One of the main projects which we're working on, which kind of Leah hinted on, is the wearable and stretchable devices. And that's one of the projects which has been quite a long time coming now. We started off with very fundamentals of it back in 2012, where just the simple motivation for us, and this is the motto of our group as well, where we are constantly trying to bring science fiction to reality. So I guess the simple motivation for us at that time was wearable technologies have come a long way, but a lot of them are still very breakable. So how can you have electronics, which is truly like your skin, which you don't feel yourself wearing, and is also unbreakable at the same time? And it turns out it's not as simple as, obviously, if it was very, very simple, people have done it before. So it was challenging, and we had to overcome quite a few materials issues and try to bring about technologies which are high in performance, but still retain their functionality and the flexibility and the conformal nature of the technology. So we managed to do that. It took us a couple of years of research to get there. And then we managed to create these, which is basically the sensors which Leah was talking about. Really thin contact lens type material, but which also incorporates a lot of electronics within it. So as you can see, it's thin, it's transparent, it's unbreakable, it's flexible, and you can't really feel yourself wearing this, and that's the entire idea behind it. So that path has kind of led us down more interesting collaborations, one among them being the one with Leah, where we're looking at user-centric design for our technologies. But we also work quite actively with industry on trying to translate this technology out from the lab. So the last thing we want as engineers is having this technology sitting within the lab without actually making its journey out of the lab. So we work with quite a few industry partners now, where we're trying to see if we can use this technology for better healthcare, for better aged care, and also for environmental monitoring. I'll cover on maybe a little more of the examples, maybe later on if something comes up, but that's pretty much where we are at right now. My journey now, as you can see from my name and also probably identify from me, I'm not from Australia. I'm actually from India. So I was born and brought up in a city called Chennai, which was previously called Madras in India. And I did my undergraduate degree back in India as well. And then I came over here in 2004 to do a master's. So doing a master's in microelectronics was what brought me to Australia in the first place in 2004. And the plan was never to stay this long. The plan was to do a master's and then go back to India. But as with all things in life, you just discover new things. You understand your passions once you start doing more things. And the fact that I could actually go into what are called clean rooms over here. So clean rooms are basically rooms which are very clean, where you gown up in a full bunny suit and you go in and make your little tiny silicone devices. So the first time I did that in RMIT, I was hooked. And I think that's what made me continue on to do a PhD, which I completed in 2009 and then just stayed on in Melbourne. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Madju and Leah. And next I have Deepthi. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your role and your journey?
Sure, Jemily. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you everyone who are here for the Bendigo Tech Schools, this Invention and Innovation Festival. Really honored. So I am working for a company called New Zealand Dairy Products. So we are based in Auckland, New Zealand. So my role is new product development manager. So as the role encompasses product development is something that starts from concept and it reaches till commercialization. So there are a lot of products in the pipeline, like adult formulas, infant formulas, elderly, sports nutrition, etc. However, right now we are completely focused on infant formula. So we are an infant formula business. That's what we call ourselves at this stage. So we use the technique, or let's say we use the concept of mixing sheep and goat milk powders and taking that as the dominant milk content and making infant formulas out of it. So as a business, we are a contract manufacturing business. So we're involved with hiring plants and working with their R&D innovation teams, and then seeing what is their ability, the manufacturing plants, and based on that, we bring out the product. And we're open to selling it Australia, New Zealand, and then, of course, as based on the market availabilities, we can. So we are also looking at different markets, different countries. So yeah, at this stage, I'm involved with all kinds of things, starting from picking ingredients, looking at formulations, working with the R&D teams, working with the consultants, working with the production managers at the plant. Also involved a little bit of regulations, looking into labeling, also working in a bit of claims. What can we claim for our products, especially for the infant formula tins? So this is what that I'm currently doing. Where do I come from? Where the journey? A bit about my journey. So before this, so in a nutshell, I would say I have around 10 plus years of experience of biotechnology and biochemistry. I do come from science, from research background. So before this, I was working as a formulation technologist for Whelan milk products. It's another humongous dairy-based business based in New Zealand. That's where I understood what an infant formula business is, how it works, the technicalities of it. Before that, I was working as an analytical scientist for Whelan milk products. I was quantifying and understanding the quality of milk proteins. I developed a method for them. Before that, I was just generally working in research. I was doing a bit of teaching, lab demonstration back in academics. Before that, for 5 years, I was working with university and industrial research both. Was making trips to Monash University, working on X-ray crystallography, working at University of Canterbury, all kinds of chromatography and protein experimentations. Also working in egg research at that point, a lot of mass spectrometry. And before that, I was in university back in India, actually, doing my biotechnology, also conducting researches. That's when I had started publishing papers, FTIR, spectroscopy, and that's how I understood that research and science is my career. So that's been my journey back. And yeah, that's pretty much where I am from in the past 10 years and where I'm now. So yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Deepthi. And we have another international panelist today in Suma. So Suma, would you like to share with us your current role and what your journey has been?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me here as part of this wonderful panel and as part of this wonderful festival. Such an honor, and true to its word, you've actually, kind of put in your efforts to bring in such wonderful resources who can share their personal and true experiences, for the benefit of younger students and a wider audience, who are going to listen to us today and probably even later when they have the recorded session. So thank you so much once again for having me. As part of the question, sorry for my groggy voice, it's very early in the morning here, so I'm joining from a southern state in India, Karnataka, in a city called Bangalore, and it's literally a very happy morning the way I started it today. Thank you so much once again. So to answer your question, what is your current role? I work with an education tech startup, and I've been with them for the last 4 years. And I handle operations, along with the team members. We are a team of engineers, and what we are trying to solve is, for the education ecosystem in India. So we work along with the central government as well as the universities and try to bring in emerging tech courses to students while they are in college. So when they graduate, they have a skill that they can put to use in the industry. What happened, or rather what is happening right now is, I don't want to generalize it, but largely, we as a society are failing the youth, right? Specifically when it comes to education. In set records, we still kind of theoretically impart knowledge on what has been done before and how things have started, which is good information to have, because historically, how things were done before and how we have progressed as a country or globally, how we progress in technology. But what happens is we don't give them the skills, right? We don't teach them how to do things, right? And when they don't have that confidence on how to, kind of put that skill to use and how to put that skill to use to build something, they're not going to have that confidence when they graduate out of college. So we are working very closely to reform the way, education is being taught in classrooms in India. And it's been a fantastic learning experience, and we're here to solve for a problem that's existing and we feel is important to solve for. So that is, the first part of the question, which is about my current role. And regarding the journey about getting here, I like the way Leah mentioned windy, windy road. I really like the way, she put it across. So it's been quite a journey. So I have over 15 years of experience in the development sectors, which includes, ranging from wastewater treatment to public health care services, to agriculture, to livelihoods, and now I've focused on education sector in the last 4 years. I've done my master's in engineering in environmental as a specialization, and then I went ahead to do my master's in public health. Both of that was in the United States. And I've always wanted to come back home. I think I didn't want to leave home to go abroad and study, but it is one of my dad's ambition for me to kind of explore the world and kind of learn from across. And I think that experience changed my life. I was in the US for 7 years, and then I moved back to India in late of 2016, and I've started working ever since then, focusing on solving issues of what we see here in the home ground and the home people. And having said that, and I think what drives me as a person is to look for impact. Anything that we do with respect to putting in time, efforts, I feel it needs to result in something, and you need to be aware of it. Like, okay, why am I working today, and what is it going to bring about? How is it going to help the future? Right? I don't want to be part of a system that's adding more problems. I would love to solve for it and keep solving for problems, so that we kind of commit to a very safe, sustainable, and a wonderful ecosystem for the generations to come. And I think that's a commitment that I'd like to live by, and that drives me every day. So I pretty much enjoy what I do, and I really look forward to waking up and get it going, and get the world to a better place for tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Suma, and for joining us so early in the morning. Thanks so much. And next we have Donna.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And thanks for the invitation to take part in this wonderful panel. So my name's Donna Whelan, and I'm a research scientist and lecturer at La Trobe University based here in Bendigo. My research sits pretty squarely within the sciences. It's very interdisciplinary in that on any particular day I might be doing biology or physics or chemistry, a bit of computer science, a bit of mathematics. And I kind of tie all of that together with core aim, which is to try and understand humans and human diseases from the most fundamental building blocks and dysfunctions. So we look inside cells and we look at single molecules. And to do that, we use a custom-built microscope that I commissioned and constructed up here in Bendigo a couple of years ago. You can see it in my background, or some of the fancy bit of it anyway. And that really allows us to go inside cells and look at individual molecules. And the molecule that I'm interested in most of the time is DNA, and how that can sometimes get damaged, and how that damage then causes, you know, pretty much all of our cancers, all of our genetic diseases, a lot of our autoimmune diseases, a lot of our neurodegeneration. So it's really this one starting point for so much of human disease. So that's kind of my area of research, area of interest. In terms of my journey, I think it's been comparatively short, but it's certainly been a bit all over the place, which is nice because of where I've ended up. Straight out of high school, I went straight into university and studied chemistry. Enjoyed it and was good at it, but wasn't convinced it was my career. So I actually took a few years and I went and did an arts degree. I worked full time in retail and education sectors. I traveled a lot, did all of that, and then kind of went, actually, I do miss being in a lab. And at that point came back and enrolled in a PhD, did a PhD again in chemistry, and then really branched out into this kind of biophysics realm, and studied biophysics when I moved overseas. So I went to New York and worked in New York University's hospital research division for a few years, and then came back and really set myself up here at La Trobe in Bendigo. So that in a real nutshell is what I do on a daily basis and how I ended up there. Thanks.
It's so wonderful to hear all of your journeys and, you know, what you're currently doing now. We're just going to go on to our next question though. At the Bendigo Tech School, we use the phrase STEAM education. So we look at science, technology, engineering, arts and mathematics. So my question to the panelists is, how do you think the arts impact our ability to conduct research and try new things? I know, Donna, you started your degree in the arts, so maybe we'll go to you first if you want to elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure, I mean, that follows on nicely from what I just said. Yeah, so I think there was certainly a push for me to do science, but I really enjoyed what I think a lot of people consider to be fairly useless humanities subjects. And I can kind of say that because I did an arts degree, and now that I'm squarely in science, I can tell you that the arts degree is actually the thing I use a lot more and is much more beneficial. So at the end of my chemistry degree, I had a few options, and one of those was to do an arts degree. It only added a year to make that into a double degree, and it allowed me to go and study things like history and literature. And I actually ended up doing a double major in philosophy. So I studied more undergraduate philosophy than I did chemistry. And yeah, as I said, I think that the skill set that I got from that arts degree is actually so much more a part of my daily process and my research. And I think that that's something that's really undervalued, not just in STEM, you know, the need for it to be STEM, but in general. You know, we look at these arts degrees as if they don't give you any of those hard skills. They're not a specialist degree. So you know, what do they get you? But when you actually look at the facts, you know, arts degree graduates are more employable than science degree graduates. And even 3 years out, they make a little bit more money than science degree graduates. There's clearly some skill set there that is really beneficial. And I think that comes down to the transferable skills. And I think in a society that is changing so quickly, and I said this a year ago, but now that we've had a pandemic, it's so much more powerful to say we need these transferable skills, this ability to learn new things and to adapt. And again, with people having so many different careers, even if you stay in science like me, you might jump around into biology or mathematics, only really having a setting in chemistry. So you know, the fact that I know a whole bunch of organic doesn't really help me. But the things that I got out of an arts degree, the things like communication skills, teamwork skills, problem solving, critical thinking, they're things that are so inherent to those humanities subjects because they're not teaching you a lot of hard skills, that you have to kind of pick them up, and they're so incredibly beneficial. They're so employable from a very practical standpoint. So I certainly think done that one extra year of arts, you know, humanities, just learning for the sake of learning subjects, I wouldn't be half the scientist I am today. And that's from somebody who has ended up very much a scientist. Thanks.
Thanks, Donna. It's so wonderful to hear that you've been able to use skills from both degrees to support where you are right now. And I know, Leah, you also, I suppose, look into the arts in your wearable technologies. Would you like to have a go at answering this question as well?
Sure. Donna, that was fantastic. It's such a great journey to illustrate the importance of embracing both parts of our brain, you know, in order to address complex problems. So at the moment, we're looking at some really meaty problems, aren't we, in the world? Like pandemics, global pandemics, you know, all sorts of environmental issues. These are really complex problems that require flexibility and collaboration in order to solve them. And so to me, a lot of, you know, why it's so important that we collaborate across the arts and scientific disciplines, but also embrace those capabilities within us as individuals, is around thinking styles. And so there's a lot of research that looks at the way that scientists think and solve problems compared to the way that designers, for instance, I'm a designer, think and solve problems. And this is around sort of problem framing. So traditionally, scientists have been needing to define the problem prior to solving it. And so you have a hypothesis, the problem's there, I make a hypothesis, I do a series of experiments and I try and solve the problem over time. Designers are really, and designers and artists are more about this co-evolution of problem and solution. So we come up with solution conjectures. We make things quickly and we throw them at the problem, and if they stick, then we evolve our understanding of the problem and the solution. So a bit more sort of flexible. And when you get those two thinking styles together, really amazing things happen. So the scientists start to think in a slightly different way. The designers start to think in a much more applied way, understanding the depth and the scale and the rigor, you know, at the micro level, what is the problem that we're dealing with? And then you can end up with this really extraordinary interface. So for me, why it's so important is that we've got some really big challenges to address, and we need all the smartest brains in the room to be collaborating, but also to empathize with each other's thinking styles and to be able to work at the interfaces of those different thinking styles. The other thing I'd say is that, you know, for every young person in the room, what do you use every single day? Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is, you know, Snapchat, like all of that is creativity plus innovation. It's engineering, science, and design smooshed together in really cool applications. So if you want to be the one that's not just consuming that stuff, but that's making it, then it's about embracing these diverse skill sets. Yeah. I don't know if that answers the question, but I think it's like super important space.
No, that was wonderful, Leah. I think it's really important that I think sometimes we look at arts and we think of arts as maybe like those fine arts that you might see in museums or galleries, but I think arts has so much more behind it as well. And I suppose, Madhu, you also work with Leah in wearable technologies. So how do you think that arts impact our ability to conduct research and try new things?
So I've been working with Leah, I think, for a couple of years now, but I think we worked on quite a few projects together. And I think where I see it from, and Leah put it beautifully, you know, when as an engineer, you're trying to solve a problem, you kind of almost have like your cloppers on and you don't want to look at anything besides the problem at the initial stages. You just want to make sure that you get a solution to the problem. But like I was mentioning earlier, there's technology and there's innovations, and then there's the path and the journey it has to make its way all the way out of the lab into real society. And then there's the user who's actually going to be using it in the society. So there's no point in making a UV sensor, which is fantastic, but is really useless in terms of, you know, how it can be used and interacted with. And I think that understanding is what Leah brings to our group. And I think I completely agree with her in terms of collaboration. My thought process are quite significantly different now. And the way I view things have changed in the last couple of years, ever since I've been talking with Leah. And I must say, when I go to conferences and I talk to them about my technology, people are interested. But when I start talking to them about the collaboration, which this has resulted in, you know, wonderful things, people sit up and listen a little more. And I think people really appreciative of the fact that you're thinking about a technology right from the innovations which it brings, right to the point of where a person's going to be using it. Like, for example, some of the things which we are making is actually for the aged care sector. And obviously keeping that in mind and keeping the age and the abilities of the people who are actually going to be using or interacting with the technology in mind. That's something I learned only from Leah. So having that, thinking it through in terms of, I'm not going to be, the way I look at the sensor and the way I interact with the sensor, a way a 7-year-old might interact with the sensor is very different to the way a 70-year-old will interact with that sensor. And I think when we want to put our technology out there, we want it to do well. We want people to go back and buy it again and again and again. And that's only going to happen if they have a good user experience. So that's where I think the arts really brings it all together.
Yeah, I completely agree with what all of you have said. And I think it's really important that we try and promote arts within the STEM culture as well. And I know, Deepti, you work in innovation and design. So how have you found arts has contributed to your role and I suppose your journey to where you are now?
Yeah, sure. I might just give two quick examples over the art and innovation, the link between them, but it's quite applied from an industrial perspective. So the way that I work on infant formulas is we look at what do the consumers require. For example, it's a 6-month-old baby who cries a lot, who poops, doesn't sleep well. So we have to have the ingredients of this infant formula which are going to benefit the infant. So we have the general things added to infant formula: carbohydrates, proteins, fats, ash and moisture. Ash is minerals. So now when we pick ingredients, this is the general contents that go into the infant formula. So now we have to, so I think how art relates to this applied science is just to just go a few steps ahead and really think of the bigger picture, that okay, it's regulated, there are enough contents required into an infant formula, but let's add a few more things. For brain development of a 6-month-old or a 10-month-old infant, let's add a bit more specific fatty acids, say DHA. Let's add a few more things which might decrease the crying of the infant while they are sleeping. So let's add a few more things like OPO. So just picking those ingredients and then designing the full infant formula, which is a bit ahead of what the usual infant formula is. So just having that kind of an open mind, which really needs that kind of creativity, or just not the specific technical perspective. So like Leah said, I think having the mind, the thinking activated from an arts perspective, that really goes a far way when we are talking about STEM. So that was the first example. And the second one would be something called change management that we do in our industries. So say we are working every day with the sales team, with the plant, with the R&D innovation team, with the ingredients. So there are a lot of supplier management. So every single time we change something in the formulation, it has to be within hours communicated to the whole team, to everywhere. So something called change management is something we have to really keep a tab on all the time. So we can do it through softwares, we can do it through log sheets, we can do it through emails, or so just having that vision or just open thinking out of the box, that how do we keep this change management, that one ingredient changes, so all the team they get informed really quickly, really fast. So although it's a simple thing, but it needs effective application throughout the teams. So this needs out of the box thinking, and I believe it will come from creativity. We cannot, as I believe, as just using my technical mindset, I don't think I can really find solutions to something which is so expensive. So I believe having a thinking process which comes from arts or creativity can really help. It's just some amateur examples that I gave, but I thought this is something we can benefit from. So it's so helpful having people from art or the art thinking and how it can impact on industries, applied science at least. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Deepti. And before I move on to the next question, I might ask Suma to start this one off, with your passion for, providing students with future skills, skills that they're going to require for the future. What advice can you give young students thinking about a career in the STEAM field?
Wonderful question. And students are our future. They are our leaders for tomorrow. If we don't commit to giving them answers to the questions that they ask, right, I think we are doing injustice, for us to expect that they are going to be solving all of our problems tomorrow. So I think young students there, for each and every one of you, we believe in you. We as students who've been in the past have come through a journey, and we know what it takes, the struggle it takes for you to find your core passion, your core interest, your core calling, and then get to what you're doing. And we all together collectively believe in you. And I think that's something we need to resound to students more often. And they have the ability and capability to be sensitive. And also, I remember in the introductory talk, I think Casey mentioned, right, we are born with no biases. And that's very important to cultivate that thought process even through education and career. And that's very, very important. So young students and students in general, ask questions, right? And I think most often, culturally, sometimes you're not allowed to question your teachers or professors, right? I mean, there is an inherent fear of asking a question. And I think that is something, we need to encourage as a society, that students can ask questions, and we need to encourage them in that behavior process. And inherently, all of you have skills. All of us have skills. And young students, you have something in you which kind of drives your energy, right? It drives you as, which makes you have fun, right? A career is also fun. Career is not something that's, boring and, you're just going to work very hard and you're not going to get any returns to it. No. Sometimes what you do, and if it's so much fun, you're going to enjoy doing every single day of it, is something that you need to have, in you, and believe that this is possible. So ask questions. You have an inherent skill, identify that, and it may be something fun, and that's totally cool, right? And if it's something that you really enjoy, even the better. And always solve for something, right? Look around. Your skill should be able to help you solve a problem around you. It need not be like a big problem. It can even be the smallest one, because every small problem that gets solved adds to a cohesive solution for a larger problem. So just keep that in mind. And of course, it's not going to be easy sometimes to convince people around you, right? You may want to do something. Your parents will have an expectation of you. And as a society, they're feeding you with data saying, this is who you need to become in order for you to earn this much, or this is who you need to become in order for you to grow in your career this way. All those are just noises, right? But when you start doing something you really love to do and you're happy about it yourself, which is very important, you need to be happy first. And when you can do that, you have the ability to convince others, right? And that is not your goal, but it is automatically will trigger solutions. You will have outcome from what you have worked. You will have evidences that will show, hey, I'm having a good time doing this and I feel good about it. And I'm helping people out there, right? And I'm solving for this. It can be anything, right? It need not be a templated path. It need not be a templated path as an engineer. It need not be a templated path as a scientist. It need not be a templated path as, as probably, the next best example I could think of is getting into teaching, right? It can even be pure joy of creating something. It can be music, it can be arts, it can be a story writer, right? It can be anything. Just focus on your skills, focus on what you love to do, right? And start creating. And when you start creating things, you will automatically be able to convince others, and thereby go in your journey of accomplishments that will drive your inner soul within to kind of get going and keep solving and keep giving. That's my 2 cents to all of you, and hope it helps. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Suma. And we share your passion. We know, we enjoy providing students with real world problems and getting them to create solutions, because they're not barriered by things that we may think of. So their solutions are amazing. So thank you for that. And I might ask Dipti next, just to add anything that, any advice that you would like to give young students about a career in the STEAM field.
Sure, Gemily, was that me? Yeah, okay, sure. So yeah, I think young students thinking about career in STEM field. So I might just share what worked for me. I believe that it might help if what I did was I just, so jack of all trades, master of one. I think if it helped me. So maybe I just picked up biochemistry, biotechnology as my foundation. So I thought I was good at that, and then I tried to become a jack of all trades, or so to say. So when I left university, I just picked up a laser sensing gas detection company to work with. So because I could use my chemistry skills, and I started talking to various industries, what kind of gas sensing technology they use to understand ammonia leakage or methane leakage in industries, food, or various sectors. Then I moved on, and I knew that I understand my mass spectrometry. I understand how to characterize proteins. I understand how to do experiments in the lab. So I was just taking that CV and going around. In between, I did some teaching for some at academic at university. And after that, at some point, I just used that skill, and I went to an industry, and I then developed some methods for milk protein testing for Whelan milk products. Then I just moved on. I saw dryers, I saw big plants, and I was so fascinated by, okay, this is how tons and tons of milk, hundreds and thousands of liters of milk gets processed. There's a dryer, there is a mixing plant, how ingredients get mixed up, and then we make infant formula. And so that was fascinating. I used my chemistry skills to understand what ingredients goes in, looked into the regulation side of it. So I think just having the biochemistry area as the foundation, I started to understand what can be done next, So I think, yeah, the world is your oyster. I think we can keep going around and seeing where can we use our area of expertise, and then keep learning, I think. So yeah, this worked for me. So if you would like to use it as well, yeah, I think that feel free to. So yeah, that's from my side.
Thanks, Stevie. That actually leads perfectly into our next question. And I love that you touched on, jack of all trades, master of one. I think it's so important that we try so many different things. And when you try different things, that's when you have that ability to find something that you like and then start to really focus on that as well. So thank you. So our next question, which I might ask Leah first, what inspires you to take on new challenges or to learn new things?
Thank you. That's really interesting. I think I was in the last question. I was formulating my response, but it's very related to my response for this question. So I'm going to a little bit respond to the last question, and that's going to flow into this question, because one of the things that just one piece of advice that I'd like to give young people, and because I teach in a university, and I deal with young people all the time, is to keep your passions alive and not to compartmentalize them. So not to say, I'm a creative person, therefore I don't do maths, or I'm a maths or a science person, therefore I can't draw, so therefore I'm not a creative person. But to realize that these are all part of you and all within you and all accessible to you. So they're just different parts of your personality that needs to come out. And that sort of flows into this, which I think with young people, and it's about this idea of curiosity and not turning off. So not turning that tap off because you've compartmentalized yourself over here, but if you can keep your curiosity alive, and curiosity is very tightly connected to creativity. So it's curiosity to learn more about what other people know in the world. And so curiosity for me is really central to all of my collaborations, because I acknowledge that I don't understand everything, but I'm curious about what Madhu does and what all my other collaborators do. I'm curious when I'm doing work in cancer hospitals, what do the nurses do and what do the oncologists do and how do diseases operate? So trying to maintain this curious mind enables you, gives you the motivation and the energy to keep on keeping on, and to overcome that imposter syndrome that we all experience. And I'm sure there's people in the audience that feel that, where, why am I here? Like, I don't have the right to be here. Like, and particularly a lot of the work that I do, I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but that's okay, because I'm going to give it a shot and I'm going to try, and I've got really good intentions. And my mindset is that I want to make a difference. And in order to make a difference, you have to be uncomfortable sometimes. So I'm going in a roundabout way to do this, but the key things that inspires me to take on new challenges is learning, continual curiosity, and just this really wanting to know what the world looks like from other perspectives. So, how do scientists see it? How do brain surgeons see it? The thing that I'm looking at, what does it look like from those other viewpoints? So that's one of the main things. And the how do we go about addressing very big problems? Sorry, there's a delivery at the door. How do we address really big problems? We address them from lots of different perspectives and collaborating across those. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Leah. That's a really powerful statement you've said there. It's that uncomfortability and, saying that I don't understand, but letting that drive you as opposed to letting that give you that fear to not try at all. So I think that's a really powerful message that you've shared there. And I suppose that takes me to Madhu, like, what inspires you to take on new challenges or learn new things?
Thanks, Casey. So I guess for me as a researcher, I can't afford to not say I will not do anything new, I will not try anything new. I guess it's part of my job description in some sense to keep trying and discovering new things. It's funny because, when you start your career, you pride yourself on predicting outcomes. When you design an experiment, you feel even more proud when you can predict the outcome of the experiment and it goes exactly as you planned. I think when you get into research, you realize it's more exciting or it's more interesting when it actually doesn't come out the way you thought it will come out. And that's where the new discovery is. When you can do something which exactly leads to exactly the same outcome, no matter when you do it or where you do it, it's not as exciting as finding something which has not really been found before, or as things have gone completely in a different direction, you're trying to explain that. So I think in that comes along with the challenge, or, comes along with the thing to constantly keep learning new things and discovering new things. I think working as a team obviously helps, working collaboratively obviously helps. Like I was mentioning in my earlier answer, when talking to Leah, that insights which I have in the last couple of years after conversations with her, a lot of the conversations I've had with industry in the last 3 to 4 years and trying to understand the world from their perspective, I think these things automatically inspire you to start doing things which will allow you to make that translational leap from research to, making a product which goes out there and actually really helps people. And I guess, so thing I was the constant line which I always use is, in my work, almost 80% of the time things don't go as planned. My success rate is probably 20%. And I think that's perfectly fine, because I think that's where the remaining 80% is where some of the interesting stories lie. But the 20% is what I need to keep my optimism going. So it's a good balance, I think.
That's so great to hear. I know that we try to explain to students at the tech school that it's okay to fail, and that's where you learn new things. And that is a scary space. Like Leah mentioned earlier, it's very scary to fail at something, but that's, I think, what inspires you and drives you to try new things as well. Donna, what inspires you to take on new challenges or to learn new things?
So I guess I'm going to really just echo what a lot of other people have already said. But being, at that kind of coalface of fundamental research, for me, the whole ball game is learning new things. As a fundamental researcher, we're really trying to discover things that nobody has known before, to see things that nobody's seen before. And it's really a solid outcome when you've got a microscope and you can physically actually go inside a cell and see, you know, a protein or a disease or a molecule or an interaction that nobody's ever seen before. So I'm definitely inspired to do that, but it's kind of my whole career and life. So I guess, you know, to echo a lot of what Marty just said, it's more, how do I maintain that inspiration and that optimism when, as you say, so much of it is a type of failure where things, you know, sometimes they don't go to plan and you get an interesting result, but I would say the majority of the time for me, things just don't work. You know, something in that 100-step process hasn't followed through and hasn't worked. And, you know, I'm getting used to that. And I wish somebody had told me a lot that was okay, because in high school and in undergraduate lab classes, if your experiment doesn't give you the result that you want, that's bad. You know, you lose marks for that. But in the real world of research, where we are aspiring to actually find out new things, discover new things, make new things, things not working is part of the process. And I think, you know, I was talking to a group of, I think year 7 students a few years ago, and it threw me for such a loop when one of them put their hand up and asked me, have you ever failed at anything? Because he saw me as this scientist who has succeeded as a scientist, and he was like, oh, you can't have ever done anything wrong. You must have been great at school. And I just thought, you know, it's 3 PM. I've had 25 things go wrong today. You know, I've just failed over and over again, and it's just part of the process. So I think it's the excitement and the power of discovering new things, of seeing new things, that inspires me to mentally and emotionally be able to have that much go wrong and not quite work. And that's something that I think is really important to tell people is okay, to tell people that that's part of doing new things and finding new things and having these exciting kind of STEAM careers.
Yeah, thanks so much, Donna. And it's great to hear everyone's journey with failure and, you know, the amazing advice that we're, you know, providing students and, you know, preparing them for the future of work. So this festival that we're part of today is part of the Bendigo Invention and Innovation Festival. And the theme this year is Optimism in Innovation. And I suppose the question I'm going to ask all the panelists is, what makes you optimistic for the future in your respective fields? So I might start this one off with Suma, if that's okay.
Sure. I think we have to be optimistic for the future. I think it's let's face it, we cannot do it any other way, because as you know, professionals right now, we have this trust that's on our shoulders, which is to solve, you know, for the generation to come, to have, you know, a society that they can comfortably breathe, enjoy, savor their life, and, you know, and thereby kind of bring about the same thing for the generations to come. So optimism is the way to go. And I will probably have to take in, you know, from the previous question and then lead to answer to this question, which is challenges. And I loved Donna's answer, right? I mean, it is amazing. Like, you know, we kind of put this constricted thoughts in the young student's mind, not encouraging for failures. And that is, I think it's a setback, right? We need to encourage for experiments, and experiments always have different results, right? And I loved how Leah and Madhu, you know, kind of keep the user in the center, and then your experiences around building things, not for yourself, right? Not for the researchers, not for the team that's building it, but for the one who's using it. That sensitivity is very important for us to, you know, be aware of. And and the nuances that Deepti is, putting in, understanding what would a baby need, in the formula, such that it can have a very comfortable upbringing, right? The empathy towards, again, donning the hat of a end user, in this case a baby, who probably not be able to express or emote comfortably, right? All these nuances comes from experimentation, which should literally remove the fear of failing, right? And the other point that I'd like to surface is, we are in no hurry. Let's take it slow, right? But let's go deep. That's very important. And I think what happens is, in the hurry, in the speed of chasing something, we forget to notice and smell the flowers around, right? And I think we all need to encourage that culture of slow, observe, enjoy, savor, give back, be grateful. All of us here today, I'm sure many of us have helped us in each of our journeys, and that's who we are today. It's just not us alone. It's a collective force that's brings the strength of, kind of solving things. And I think as researchers and as professionals and as storytellers, we need to believe in every single potential in every single life around us. And I think that's what I look forward to the most. That drives me the most, to see, to have a student walk up to us and say, we really enjoyed this. So, we had one student who commented in the last few months that said, if not for this course, it would have been very tough, for me to handle the pandemic, right? So some of us give solutions and a short duration of liberation to the souls around. And I think that's very important for all of us. And I think that probably summarized my thoughts in some way, borrowing from the last question. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Suma. And yeah, you're right. There's great satisfaction when, students mentioned, thanks so much, we've learned so much. And, it's a great thing to think about for what keeps you optimistic for the future, is those, I suppose we call them wow moments. So I'd like to pass this question on to Deepti on what makes you optimistic for the future, coming from an industry perspective.
Yeah, sure. Actually, also looking at it from my field's perspective, I think just continuing to walk, continuing to go ahead wherever we are at least that helps me. So for example, say if I'm working as an NPD product development manager today, I know from here the career path can be everything. It could be supply chain, looking at ingredients. It could be technical, looking at formulations. It could be government regulation based, looking at labeling. It could be consultancy of for designing claims. It could be from that perspective. So from here, paths, there can be so many career paths. So I think I would like to say optimism through innovation is just keep going on selecting and then keep going whatever that you want to do. So yeah, I think just going from point A till point B, because once we reach point B, from there we'll see how many other intersections are there, and then pick your path and go till there. From the next intersection, we'll see, okay, there are another roundabout or another 4 other cross sections. So we have to keep going and reach that point, and from there, then we get to know what's next, what's coming up. And to this, I would want to add just having 2 things continuously going. First is curiosity, second is growth. Always being curious to why is it happening, what's happening, what's next. So I think curiosity really adds to whatever that adds to our skills, and growth is just learning one single thing every day. I think that has really helped me, and that has kept me going. And I think if we can do this, I think that's great. And I'm really inspired with Donna and Suma's answers as well about failures. I think that's something, I think once we have failed on something already one time, we know that, okay, there's no way going back there. So that's kind of a new success. We know that we have to change our direction and go to another part. So I think just ticking off the box that, okay, all right, we have failed at that, it's done. So I think that's also part of the growth. So I think overall, going ahead like this, continuing to grow, continuing to keep walking on in our chosen direction, that would anyways lead us to where we want to be. So that, I believe, for me, that is optimism through innovation.
Thanks so much, Deepthi. And I love that you brought up curiosity, because I think questions and asking lots of them is really important to getting, is leading into that innovation. It's that continual cycle of asking lots of questions. So I might pass this one next to Donna about what makes you optimistic for the future in your respective field.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Suma that it is our only option. If we're not going to be optimistic, then what are we doing? Go and try something that you can be optimistic about is my advice there. But I'm hugely optimistic in the niche that I'm in this interdisciplinary kind of bringing together big teams to answer big questions area. But I guess my particular optimism that's come about from the last few years is this decision to move back to Bendigo. I did all of my undergraduate studies at Monash. I did a lot of research at Monash, and then I did my postdoctoral studies at New York University. So I'd really been in big cities, big universities, big institutions where you're surrounded by, hundreds and thousands of professors of, the research elite. And the opportunity to move to a regional campus that is really trying to grow their research and make research part of La Trobe's regional profile, I saw that as a kind of added opportunity on top of all of the science that I enjoy doing and the teaching that I enjoy doing. I think there's this untapped resource in regional areas around a lot of Australia, and Bendigo is definitely one of them, where you've got a community that is ready to engage, you've got industries that are ready to engage, you've definitely got students that are ready to engage, and to see that there was this opportunity to move up here to continue on with my research, but have all of this untapped resource around me in terms of, curious minds and people that I've found are really receptive and really willing to engage and take part, but perhaps didn't have as much of a research community there. That's the thing that I'm most excited about and that I'm most optimistic about, that ability to really exponentially grow research capacity, but also through the work of everybody else that's here at La Trobe Bendigo. They're hiring a lot of people, they're growing that research. It's exciting, and it makes me really optimistic because there's so much potential that I haven't really seen before at these big, massive universities.
That's so great to hear, Donna. I know that there's it's a niche market in a country university, but I think there's so much to be excited about. And I think that's something that you definitely promote, that there's a lot of exciting things that are happening at the Bendigo space. And I think that's something that is quite optimistic for Bendigo. But this leads me to Leah. What makes you optimistic for the future in your respective field?
It's been such an amazing series of responses, and I think it's just really brought up, these ideas of, I'd like to kind of reframe failure as iteration. Like we in design, we're always thinking about iteration, and so everything is part of a journey towards the final outcome, and it's getting you closer and closer and closer to the answer. So that doesn't really answer your question, but I got so excited about all the things that everyone was talking about. I just wanted to bring that up. I'm going to be a bit soft and squishy here, but what really inspires me are my children and the way that they're thinking about the world. And particularly at the moment, we've just bought a loom, and my daughter is, she's 12, and she's assembled the loom and she's taught herself how to weave. Simultaneously, she's doing her maths homework and, building structures. They're both in their building structures. And their ability to move flexibly across a range of problem spaces and to really creatively generate outcomes that aren't compartmentalized into, you know, this is a engineering challenge, this is a creative challenge. So really that sort of generation of kids that are, they are digital natives, but they're also makers, and they're able to look at any problem and any challenge and come to it with this sort of fresh set of ideas and fresh eyes. And I guess what I'm optimistic about is that if we can change the narrative and change the idea of careers a little bit for the young people, so that it's not you go into STEM to the exclusion of all else, or you go and be an artist and paint at an easel. You know, that there's a lot more flexibility in the way that universities are offering courses and thinking about interdisciplinary collaboration as the foundation of big problem solving. I'm optimistic that our young people, the 12-year-olds and the 10-year-olds, by the time they get to uni, will have the kind of skills that are required for the work that we're doing, or the work that needs to be done. And I'm optimistic because, you know, at a lot of the campuses, and so there's the science district at the Melbourne Innovation District, which is like engineering and arts and everything, smushing them together, you know, the kinds of things that RMIT is trying to do, and La Trobe, you know, that the universities are recognizing that to address these big issues, we need a much more collaborative aspect and way of doing it. We're starting to see that reflected backwards throughout the schooling, from high school, you know, through into primary school, where design thinking is coming in as a core component for understanding and solving problems. So I'm quite optimistic about that. I think we've got some really big challenges, but you know, the young people are the young people. It's a bit daggy, but you know, the 10-year-olds, the 12-year-olds, they've got some really great smarts there, and they're seeing the world in a different kind of way.
That was beautifully put, Leah. I think it's really wise to sort of look at the children as well, not only as the ones that are learning about things that are happening in the future, but also the ones that are shaping the future as well. And I know we're all spending a lot more time at home, so I think it's really important that everyone's sort of exploring that creativity side, doing hobbies that they probably didn't do in the past when they didn't have the time. But that leads me to Madhu. What makes you optimistic for the future in your respective field?
Maybe keep this a bit simple. I think we are in the middle of a pandemic, and sometimes I just imagine, you know, if this pandemic had happened 20 years before, what would it have looked like for all of us? I think in spite of a pandemic, the way the technological leaps have gone forth, you're still able to stay connected. And I think the very fact we know doing this session, you know, and still being able to stream it across to everyone in Australia, the fact that we can go online for a session like this, the fact that schools can still keep going through with remote learning, the fact that I can still keep communicating with my parents in India. And yesterday, I actually video chatted with my grandmother. So, you know, just to see the people embracing technology and the way technology has allowed us to stay connected, I think that itself, you know, gives me enough optimism that we've got this. You know, no matter what the world throws at us, and a pandemic is probably one of the worst things that can throw at us, we still are able to stay connected, still are able to, you know, reach across the boundaries of the world and still keep talking to each other. So I think that's what makes me optimistic.
Yes, that is so true. I think the way that everyone has adapted in the world is definitely reflecting on how optimistic everyone can be as well, which leads us to some audience questions. So I'm going to leave the Q&A open for about a minute to see if anyone in our audience would like to ask our wonderful guests any questions. Oh, we've already got one already. So this question here: how did you all choose your path in STEAM, and what helped and what were the obstacles? So I might ask Suma, would you like to start? How did you choose your path in STEAM, and what helped and what were the obstacles?
Frankly speaking, I was put into engineering. I remember when I was, finishing my grade 12, and at that juncture, there were only three options. It was either be a doctor or be an engineer or an architect, right? But I've been writing since the age of 6. So writing is my core passion, right? But then at that time, if I were to tell my parents I want to become a writer, right, I don't think they would have understood. And I'm not blaming them, right? Because we society have cleverly manipulated the minds of people, specifically in how to groom a child for a successful future, right? And we need to break that myth. And that can be broken only when you overcome obstacles. And that's by living a path that you choose to live. That's very important. I think the largest struggle I've had is for me to be able to consistently stand up for my choices. But I think that's a very beautiful struggle to endure because you're very satisfied at the end of the day. I'd like to go to bed thinking I have done my bit for today and I'm happy about it. And that is very, very important. And I think we also have to encourage a messaging of ethics. Ethics is very important regardless of which field you're in, right? You have to do things with the right attitude and with a right intent in order for it to achieve its truest potential, right? No shortcuts. It's going to be a hard journey. It's going to be a long journey, but sustain. And along that path, you will meet such beautiful people, right? Who will, you'll probably be thinking, okay, how am I going to get this done, right? How is this going to be possible for me? And that's the time, because your intent and your pursuit was always in the right direction, you are going to meet and your path is going to cross with other likely minded people around you. And together you can actually bring about a change. And that happens only if you are satisfied with yourself. So the empowerment is you, the obstacle is within you, the overcoming potential is again with you, but take help, right? You're not in this alone. Look around, you will know who to talk to, you'll know who listen to you, right? So, and take help, and that's very, very important. And that's something that I would like to, share as a parting thought as part of the session. And I just loved hearing the stories from the panel today. So motivating, and there's not one single individual here who is not driven by passion, right? And the observations to what you see around and how that can drive you in turn. So yeah, that's pretty much a summarized thought from my end. Thank you.
I think it's so true what you said, that those obstacles that might arise, that they actually motivate you to overcome them, and the satisfaction you get from doing that motivates you even more. So that's really fantastic to hear, Suma. I might ask Madhu, how did you choose your career path in STEAM, and what helped you, or what were some obstacles you faced?
I was kind of hoping you'll choose me, because I started laughing when Suma spoke about her career choices which were presented to her. And I think that relates a lot to my Indian upbringing as well. And for me, I guess it was mainly only one career option, which was to become a doctor like my parents. And instead I rebelled and ran another direction. Still an accepted direction, I think, to become an engineer. But nevertheless, I think it speaks a lot for our Indian upbringing, and I can relate very, very strongly to what Suma was talking about. So for me, I guess my parents wanted me to be a medical doctor, and they're both medical doctors. So it was almost, kind of globally accepted that I'll become one as well. But for me, I think what really motivated me was the fact that, I was getting my first computer in my house. I used to spend hours and hours playing a computer game called SimCity on it. I spent like weeks, months just playing that game. It was fascinating that I could put a little computer on my table, and that gives me so much entertainment. The way the telephone, kind of evolved during my entire childhood, going from, something which is connected to a wall. So whenever you had to speak on the phone, you had to be tethered to the wall because the phone is tethered to the wall. And then you had a cordless phone, which allowed you to roam around the entire house. And that felt like freedom. The fact that you were not tethered to the wall anymore, you could take your phone in your hand and walk around the house and have a conversation. And then by the time I finished up and I was nearing year 12, the mobile phones were out. And so you could now, no longer are you tethered to the house, you can actually have a phone call or talk to anybody anywhere from anywhere in the world. So I think those kind of technological leaps kind of really motivated me to do engineering, and specifically electronic engineering. So that was kind of, why I chose to do whatever I chose to do. In terms of obstacles, and I think it's more of a realization or a journey for me in some sense, because I came here, I realized there are not so many women in engineering, specifically in electronic engineering. And I think for me, one standout moment was when I went away on maternity leave in 2013. And I was the first woman in engineering to go on maternity leave in 20 years. And it was amazing because people had no clue what to do with me. They just didn't understand an academic is actually going away maternity leave, and how to support a person who's going away maternity leave in engineering was something which just didn't come from it. So I think I was gobsmacked at the entire, just the fact that something like this, which is so normal, which happens all the time, is, something which is so foreign to in a setting like this. And that in some sense motivated me to do a lot of the gender work. So setting up a women researchers network at RMIT, and then contributing to a national policy and sitting on the board of directors, Women in STEM Australia. All of these things are things which came out from that realization of, how very, very less represented women are in engineering, how much more knowledge has to be grown on engineering, and how few role models there are. And just the motivation, I guess, to just make sure that we do the right thing going forward. So I wouldn't call it an obstacle. I would call it, I guess, a teaching moment or a learning moment. But, nevertheless, when it happened, it's a little too surprising.
I love the reframing of that it's not an obstacle, that it's that teaching moment. And I think it's so crazy to think that only 7 years ago, that was something you had to think about, was maternity leave in your department, and that it hadn't really come across before. And I know it's just something that it's hard to imagine in 2020 that would happen now. But I suppose we have time for one more to answer this question, and then we'll have to wrap up our session, unfortunately. So I might leave this to Donna. Donna, how did you choose your career path in STEAM, and what were some challenges or obstacles you might have faced?
Sure. So I think I didn't have a lot of pressure on me within the family beyond doing something that I loved. And that was in itself a bit of a challenge, because I had so much perceived pressure from people around me from school who were pushing towards science or medicine. And I think a really pivotal moment, which immediately springs to mind, is my VCE English teacher, who was also my homeroom teacher, actually had heard me agonize over this decision about what to study, that in my yearbook, she actually wrote, "Why don't you just study science and arts?" That was her main takeaway. So I guess that was one of the driving forces to actually do what I wanted to do. And again, as I've said, it really did end up paying off. The decision to make a career out of scientific research still took longer. It took me, a few years away from a lab to actually be independent enough to feel like I was confident in coming. I wasn't just doing the thing that was expected of me. So that, in a lot of ways, that is, I think, quite a emotionally satisfying trajectory into where I've ended up. But in terms of obstacles, to really build on what's already been said, and I never felt like I had any serious obstacles, and it's always been kind of just do the next thing. But on reflecting about my biggest moments of doubt and fear, the one that I always come back to, because it's still so pivotal for me now and plays a big part in my decision making, is the first big international conference I went to. I went alone. It was the first year of my PhD, and I went to Germany, and I sat in a lecture theatre for 3 days straight, and I didn't hear a single woman speak. And this was on my area that I wanted to go into. It was 3 days. It would have been dozens of, world leaders, brilliant scientists. One of them got a Nobel Prize a couple of years later. But I was just sitting there thinking, there aren't any women. There were women in the audience, but nobody was actually, there were no women that were speaking. And I've still got those emails that I sent my mentors going, how am I going to make it in this world where that's what I'm presented with? And I did have great mentors, and I got through all of that. And it was it's something I had to overcome, and it was a learning experience. But what it feeds into now is that if I'm invited to go to a conference, or if I'm fortunate enough to be chosen to speak at a conference, and then who else is going, if they're not inviting enough women, I won't go, and I won't let my students go. And it's a slow moving process, and certainly in some fields, so in the more microscopy engineering fields, it's a slower process, but there needs to be effort from everyone. And for me, that remains one of the big challenges, I guess, that we do have to address. And for me, it was something that still kind of niggles all the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that personal moment, Donna. I know that's something that we are trying to promote by having this International Women in STEAM Forum. But unfortunately, our time has come to an end, and it has been so wonderful, and I'm absolutely honoured, and I know Gemily is the same. She's absolutely honoured to be a part of this forum with you guys, and we'd just like to say a massive thank you for making the time to spend with us today for Bendigo Invention and Innovation Festival. And we know that if the audience has any more questions, that they can email the Bendigo Tech School. We'll put our details on the screen at the end here, and they can email any questions and we'll pass them on to our guest speakers. But from the Bendigo Tech School, it is a massive thank you to all of you today. We'd also like to thank Radhika Arunkuma, who has connected us with all of you today. She has put in a mammoth effort to help us network with you all, and so a big thank you to her as well. So thank you everyone, and to the audience, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you are able to join us for future sessions for the rest of the afternoon. So thank you so much.